in 15 minutes. Once again, it's glad to see because we are actually going to get started. Can everyone hear me, first of all? Excellent. Well, so if you've already grabbed lunch, our presentation will begin at 9:11. I want to remind you, we are now slightly rebranded as the Boulder Chamber Transportation Connections. And so this is part of our process to show that we are a unified group that are now working hand in glove on these issues, not solely two separate organizations working together, but one organization working together even better. So we look forward to thanking our Connect partners here. So first of all, City of Boulder, thank you very much. Way to go. And RTV. So if you haven't already gotten familiar with your Transportation Connection staff here at the Boulder Chamber, we're delighted to have Terry Wardinghouse work in the front right here. Executive Director, our Associate Executive Director, brand new title, and she's come on board, Darcy Kitchen. In the back, we've got, you can clap, it's okay. Can't talk to each other, but you can clap. In the back, our Sustainable Transportation Planner, Elaine. And our TM Outreach Specialist, Will Shepard. I don't know who this guy is, but I'm glad to be here as well. I'm Senior Director of Policy Programs for those of you who don't know here in the Boulder Chamber. And are thrilled to be trying to build passing applause for myself, so thank you. So we only have about 43 slides and 40 minutes, so we should be able to get through this incredibly quickly, folks. We are chock full of information today. Before we do that, I know we've got some fans going, so this is the part of the audience participation part of the show here, where we have people announce themselves by name and who they are affiliated with today. So if we want to just start in the front, this is also the yoga section where you get to turn around and look at everybody else. Just say who you are, who you're with, and we'll move on to the next person.
Everyone, EJ Clark and Coach from RMI.
Henry Riddle and RMI.
Carl Lawrence with Major Transit. Gary Sprung with Colorado Rail Passenger Association and Community Center. Mike Wells with the Education Advisory Board and Community. Will Atkinson, RMI. Chris Hagman, City of Boulder. Carl Durkin, VA Systems. Florida Boulder City Council. Mark Wood, Community Cycles, and
Stephanie Mayer, community. Happy Burger, Postmasters.
Samuel Delmat, Center of Fraud, Enterprise Community.
Olympic Temple, Voice for Children, Constable Boulder County.
Rich Freeman with Senator Boulder.
Mayor Freeman, Advocate there, Boulder, these are all forwarded by
All right now, all the county. Matt Howard, software.
Amy Tomczak, front range community college, deputy right here at the top of the round. And seeing my color with the
Go back, work our way from my right. Who do we have there?
Frank Bruno, BMO Officers. At the Canadian Board and the Board of the Board. Advancement to the Board. Alvin Margot, to the Board.
I'm currently on board the ready.
All right. So in case you didn't realize this, we are a membership-based organization. And so if you want to learn about all the exciting opportunities you can have as a member, please talk to Lindsay and after you enjoy the sandwich. So instead of going through the entire agenda right now, because we do have a lot of slides to go through, we are going to be bringing you some updates. I'll give you a legislative update as well. As the session just ended almost exactly a month ago. And then we've got some insights from our principal planner at the city of Boulder, and then an amazing presentation by folks at the Rocky Mountain Institute. But we'll start with the transportation connection updates with Darcy.
All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Elaine, come on up. There you are. Okay, good. So, quick updates for you. What to work later next week?
In hosting a breakfast station for my doorstep. I realize there's a lot of. Fantastic, like 50 stations, make sure you get around, please make sure you register for bike to work day, they'll drive out. So,
There's a QR code to register if you haven't already. We have a super duper station this year. It's great. We've got 19 booths in our parking lot. We're going to have a festival. So please stop by on your way to all the other wonderful breakfast stations that you're going to visit. We're going to have an amazing experience here with lots of great stuff. I ordered my special bike to work day shirt, not realizing that it was a crop top. All right. So after the breakfast station in the morning, of course, there's a bike home happy hour. This is hosted by Community Cycles and City of Boulder. It's going to be a deal.
so we look forward to seeing people out there. It's been a really fun month. The bike show was the best ever, just on Tuesday. There's also a Community Cycles membership party on the 28th that kind of concludes the month of great activities. So as we say, register, get out, ride, have fun. If you need posters and materials, we've got some on the table, please grab those.
Ooh, that's 4 to 7 p.m. at Field and Boulder Junction. Another super quick update for you. Who here knows about the alternative transportation tax credit, 50% tax credit? Just so this is really important. It for tax year 2023, 2024, it was part of House Bill 1024. It has now been carried forward as part of House Bill 1036. A lot of numbers. But the great news is that it continues to 2027. So that gives a chance for employers who have not yet taken advantage of this tax credit to get 50% of the cost of providing sustainable and alternative transportation options to their employees, to get that back up to $250,000 at an organization, or up to $2,000 per employee. It's an amazing deal. We can help you navigate that process. Please be in touch with us. We are also helping companies and nonprofits navigate the Colorado Clean Commute certification process. I don't know if you saw our Clean Commute seal on the window as you were coming into the building. This is a really great opportunity to have your employees surveyed to learn about what their commute habits and patterns and interests are, and how you could make take advantage of alternative transportation options for your staff. So please get in touch with me to learn more about that. Of course, we now have a Boulder Clean Commute program. There's a QR code to access that. We're looking for employers to sign up for that program to move forward with actual cash incentives for employees who do anything but drive alone to work. So those are our super quick updates. Now we're going to move forward into Jonathan's presentation. Yay!
All right. So before we go into this, this is the second audience participation portion of the show. So first of all, what day is Bike to Work Day? Next Wednesday. No one knows the date. It's June 26th. But it's coming up next Wednesday. I would be remiss in mentioning or not mentioning the fact that we still are working on getting adequate bike. And so, all right, got one clap on that one. That's good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is one of the things that we're certainly working on, and so we're remiss in not mentioning that we're going to be working with our own internal budget components to make sure that we can actually get people here to feel like they can safely walk up and use those transportation options that we're established. Hopefully, we'll put them on the route. We'll just pull the route. That was my second part of the audience participation portion. What percent tax credit would that be, Carl? 50%. So half off, which means we get twice the size of the bike rack we were originally planning on getting. So still pay tax. Yeah, not still pay taxes. So anyway, so we're moving forward here with the legislative update. Because what's more exciting than taxes? I don't know. Fees. So for those of you who weren't aware, this is actually I'm going to nerd out for just a second and then really talk about why we're doing this. Oil and gas wars. Love fracking, hate fracking, however you feel about it. Both sides were going to the ballot this year with different initiatives. Oil and gas industry was going to the ballot with initiatives that would undone the legislation that was done in 2019 around setbacks and other things to protect public safety. The environmental groups out there were moving forward with ballot initiatives to actually increase things to the degree that the oil and gas industry said that it would virtually eliminate the oil and gas industry in the state. Rather than have this mutually assured destruction at the ballot where it looked like all these initiatives would quite possibly have passed and quite possibly be conflicting with each other, landing us for it probably at a stalemate, both sides decided to work together this year. And what they did is they said, we're going to create new oil and gas production fees, and they're going to go to three things. Now, the first one I'll talk about is environmental remediation, ensuring that we have the right kind of inspectors in the right places to make sure that when land is either harmed or there's potential of harm, that we're able to take care of that remediation and have the oil and gas industry pay for it itself rather than putting it on the burden of the taxpayers. Now, more importantly is this. If you didn't know this, RTD is funded through sales tax. Very few of their dollars come from the state general fund. That's changing with this bill. It's going to be $100+ million a year for transit. 70% will go to organizations like RTD. 10% will go towards local transit programs. So if you're thinking about those new innovative programs that we're trying to do locally, those are the kinds of things that we can talk about now funding through this fund. And then rail funding. And really prioritizing rail funding coming up through Boulder, Longmont, and Fort Collins. And so this is not going into effect yet, but we'll go into the details. But like I said, it really prioritizes the development of that Northwest. So I'm going to do one more slide and we'll see if there's any brief questions. So RTD, we've had a few pickups recently, and we know that we've been underfunding them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be spending an additional almost $100 billion to ensure that we're shoring up the necessities to get the ridership and the frequency back to where it needs to go. Debrucing. We're not talking about Bruce Springsteen, folks. Debrucing happens to be a discussion on Tabor. Debrucing is, Bruce was the name, Douglas Bruce was the name of the author of Tabor. Part of the issue with Tabor is this. If revenues exceed what an arbitrary formula sets to the state, to the city, to a school district, to RTD, those dollars don't remain with those organizations. Those dollars go back to you, back to businesses in the form of tax credits, or tax refunds. Now, well, we already know that there are structural and financial deficits that need to be funded through RTD. There's now an effort to ensure that an additional $40 to $60 million annually remains in RTD so they can spend the money on those kinds of things that we're talking about without raising taxes. The RTD board votes on this on the 25th, so in about 5 days. But I wanted to give you the sneak preview here. So the polling here is pretty high on the issue. This polling was done just about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now. But 68% of folks said that without imposing new taxes or increasing tax rates, that they would allow RTD to authorize them to retain and spend those revenues on those kinds of resources that we're talking about. Now, this could change. This number could go up and go down. Polls are really good at talking about a single point in time. We are working diligently through the numbers and talking to our board to see whether or not we will officially endorse or when we will officially endorse. But this is something to for all of you to be thinking about, because election day is not just about the candidates, it is about the issues. So be looking for this in November. In all likelihood, it looks like the board, the RTD board, will be voting unanimously to put this on the ballot. But then it will be incumbent on the voters to make that decision one way or the other. So any questions about either of those? Yeah.
So on the previous slide, the first bullet point, wildlife environment remediation, do you know if that includes atmospheric remediation, type methane?
So the question, I'm going to repeat the question because I know we've got the fans going here. So the question was, do we know whether or not whether that remediation includes, is it land, is it water, is it air? Because air quality is a huge component of what oil and gas is. Interesting story. I don't know. Yeah, but more interestingly, I'm double checking right now, and what I'll say about this is the reason that we were able to put this fee in place. Fees have to go to a specific service. So, for example, when I go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and pay, the $20 or $30 it takes to get my driver's license, that's all those dollars can go to is the DMV. It's not paying for it's not paying for school books, it's not paying for teachers, it's not paying for anything else. So the linkage here is we know that oil and gas production is a greenhouse gas emission producer. We also know that more vehicles on the road are greenhouse gas emission producers. So I don't know, but I will get back to you on that one to see whether it includes air. I do know that it's split between CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and Department of Natural Resources. DNR is responsible for funding those oil and gas inspectors. Part of what those oil and gas inspectors do is they do look at fugitive emissions, especially the new focus has been on fugitive emissions on orphan wells. So these are wells that have been abandoned by the oil and gas industry and now still continue to emit in one way or the other. So the funding is there. I don't know if it's specifically enumerated here, but the departments that will be receiving these dollars have that responsibility. And I'll try and get you a better answer than that a little more. So, other questions on getting rid of Bruce Springsteen or on our. All right, with that, I'm excited to move on then. So we're going to move on to Chris Hackman, our principal planner of the City of Boulder, to talk about mobile shift report summary. So thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Once again, Chris Haglund, Principal Planner with the City of Boulder. Moves on not blinded. I'm here to present our mobile shift report, which is the report that shares the result of our resident travel diary. Before that, I just want to say how important it is that we look at that DeGru thing. We do know that our service and RTD service has been degraded in our community over the years. We need to get that back if we're going to meet the goals that we're tracking using this report. Also really encourage anybody who's with an employer today to contact the Chamber of BTC or BCTC. I'm going to have a hard time remembering that. To take advantage of that 50% tax credit. This means if you're buying eco passes for your employees, you get half of what you spend back in a tax credit. Anything like that, van pool subsidies. These are the things that help us move these needles that I'm going to be talking about. So the modal shift report is a report that goes out. We do it about every 3 years now. We started doing it in 1990. So we have a huge longitudinal data set that we can track travel behavior by our residents. This is conducted by a third party, Polco Research, which formerly was the National Research Center, which was actually started here in Boulder and really started to help do these surveys. What we're doing is we're tracking all of resident travel behavior and also looking at demographics. So the survey itself is based on the sampling criteria to match those demographics. Then the survey results are also weighted to match those demographics. We use this report in many ways. First of all, it's really just tracking our progress to meeting our transportation master plan goals, our climate action goals. But we also use it in our planning efforts to really see, how investments we have made over time have affected how residents travel. You think about what the city has invested in our multi-use pass system. I think we're up to maybe 100 underpasses now in the city of Boulder. That has taken time and money, but those are purposeful investments meant to help, for the safety of those wishing to travel by foot or bike within our city. The survey itself is also paired with our Boulder Valley Employee Survey. This is the survey I presented on, I guess, a few meetings ago here, and that tracks all the travel behavior of employees, those which are residents and some of which are non-resident employees. And you can also find that report in the same location. The link to the transportation data and maps page is here. This is where you can find all the interactive maps of the city and these survey reports. We shoot for about 1,000 responses. I think we had 998 valid responses to the survey. Given our population size, that results in a 1.3% sampling area. So a very nice, accurate survey. The households are selected from all of the Boulder community based on demographic, location, kind of like homeowners versus renters, college students, non-college students, ethnicity. All those things are carefully included into the sampling plan. What we do is when households are asked to do the survey, one person within that household, selected household, and then they are asked to track all their trips in a 24-hour period. And they're given a complete set of instructions of how to do that and fill out the forms, which are then provided back to the survey. So here's the big mother of all slides. This is really tracking the modal split of all trips by Boulder residents. And we've been tracking this, as I said, since 1990, so we can see the trend of how we do it. And so you gotta remember, this is all trips. And we define a trip, walking down to your neighbors to have dinner with them, that is a trip. Going to work is a trip. Going to the grocery store, entertainment, restaurant, all of those things, exercise. These are all types of trips. A lot of people think of trips as a lot of work trips, but work trips are really only about 20% of all the trips that you could take. What we've seen is a statistically significant decline in single occupant vehicle trips over time. So we're down at about 35% of all trips are in a single occupant vehicle. So we can see that we're moving downward, but our goal in our transportation master plan is to get to the 20% of all trips being in a single occupant vehicle. So although we're making good progress in going down, we still have a long way to go to meet our transportation master plan goal. It's interesting to see that multiple occupant vehicle trips have kind of slightly gone down, but not at the pace of the single occupant vehicle trips. These would be any trip with more than one person in a vehicle. We also look at trips that are those that contain just children or other adults. So we see those trends. We also look at walking trips and bicycle trips. The bicycle trip is a little different in this year's survey, since we're specifically also looking at e-bike trips and e-scooter trips. But oftentimes in the report, those are lumped into the bicycle category. But we can parse them out when needed. What you can see over time is both pedestrian and bicycle trips have steadily increased within the city as we've made these investments to make bicycling and walking safer in our cities. Our investment that I mentioned are our multi-use path and our underpass. Transit trips, we saw steady increase over time in transit trips, but as I mentioned, the importance of this RTD funding is, we are starting to see some declines, a trending decline in transit trips. I think this has everything to do with two things. One, the reduction of RTD service in our community. If you think back when we were at our height back in 2008 around, this is when we had all those 200 routes serving Boulder, all those local routes. We had high frequency on all our named routes, the skip, the jump, the dash, all those. We have seen service integration in that. We also had the impacts of COVID. We saw in our Boulder Valley employee survey
that we had significant declines in transit use for work trips. And that was stemming from COVID, but we are seeing, hopefully we'll start seeing that come back up as we get more service. One thing that I thought was interesting is with the explosion of trips in our line system and our B-cycle system that we're starting to be able to measure now how many trips are taken on e-scooters and e-bikes. And 4.4% of all the trips taken by Boulder residents are now on e-scooters or e-bikes. I remember 10 plus years ago writing the RFP for the B-cycle system. And for years, we averaged about 100,000 trips. We switched to electric assist B-cycle bike, and we have the program with CU that every student at CU know, along with getting an eco pass to get a B-cycle membership. We saw those 100,000 trips become 500,000 and now over 750,000. We hope someday we'll have 1 million B-cycle trips. I think with Lime, we'll probably see 1 million trips this year on Lime scooters, also driven by students. So we can see these trends over time. So it's great to have this data source that we can look and see the changes. Work trips by residents. This is really interesting when we think about the change over time of where Boulder employees live and where Boulder residents work. But today we see that on average about 47% of Boulder residents travel to work, so just those work trips in an SUV. That's down from 67% in 1990. So we have made over time significant progress in reducing single occupancy trips for work trips. But we see a huge difference on where people live and how they get to work. If you're a Boulder resident employed in Boulder, you're only driving to work in an SUV about 38%. If you're in Denver, 64%. Any other place, almost 90% of your trips, work trips are in an SUV. So that just shows the impact on good transit access and other multimodal access. In Boulder, it's very easy to not drive to work on those trips because you have more options. Getting to Denver, fairly easy with the Flatiron Flyer service. Anywhere else, you're more generally driving. Teleworking. This is one of the biggest impacts of COVID that's lingering and continuing to go. So we've been tracking telework since 1990, and we have seen telework go from about just under 10% of people reporting that they teleworked on the day they did the survey to now like a quarter of Boulder residents say they telework the day that they took the survey. But then we also broke it down and we were looking at the frequency of telework, and you can see that only 25% of people who live in Boulder who are employed, only 25% have never teleworked in that year, that survey year. But most people report that they telework 5 days a week or more. So we see that huge impact on that new kind of teleworking and hybrid work environment. It's not only having it on our employee population in general, but also really affecting the residents who we have in our city who are also CU travel behavior. So I think a lot of people forget that CU students, excuse me, are about a third of our population, you know, just under a third of our population. And, you know, but if everybody traveled like a CU student, we'd be meeting all our TMD goals. Just of how little they drive. You can just think about proximity of where they live, to school, to work, and their activities that, you know, the vast majority of their trips are on bike and on foot. We're starting now, I haven't done it yet, but I'm doing a special look at CU travel behavior and breaking out from that bike category all the Lime scooter trips, all the B-cycle trips. So we'll be able to see that as well. But you can see just students travel differently, and we've provided them the tools to do that. We think that every college student, along with all the faculty and staff, receive their eco pass, and the students also get their B-cycle membership. That's what it's about. It's about providing the infrastructure of how to do it, but also these transportation demand management programs like the B-cycle and eco pass tools so that they can change the one of the newer metrics that we've been following is vehicle miles capita. So this is basically, if you were to add all the miles that you would take in a day within a vehicle, whether it's a single occupant vehicle or a multiple occupant vehicle, how many total miles does the average Boulder resident travel in a vehicle? And this takes into account vehicle occupancy, so you're not double counting miles when two different people are sharing a vehicle spot. But you can see that overall, we've got about 12 miles a day what people are traveling in a vehicle if you're a Boulder resident. If you take out people who are Boulder residents but they work somewhere else, it cuts it down a lot because a lot of those miles that people are traveling are work trip miles when they have to leave Boulder. But we see that, back in 1996, we're over 15 miles per day, so we're down to 12. Really, to meet our TMP goals, we need to get this down to 7 or 8 miles per day in a vehicle. So that gives you an idea of, once again, making progress, but not quite on track to meet some of our goals. I've talked about RTD a little bit. RTD is integral to us meeting our transportation and our climate goals. And we know we've had a lot of, setbacks, but we need to get RTD back on track, and we need those services provided. When we look overall at travel behavior in the city of Boulder, the two most important things of what impacts travel behavior is access to an eco pass and whether or not you have to pay for parking at work. That is really what makes the difference. You just see it come out in this data. The Eco Pass is one of those tools that was developed in Boulder in partnership with RTD. We have business Eco Pass, we have the neighborhood Eco Pass, we have the college pass, we have our district program in Boulder Junction and downtown. People have an Eco Pass in their pocket, they travel differently. And this is why we really need to support this program and get our transit service back online. When you have an eco pass, not only do you take the bus significantly more than people without a pass, people also walk and bike more when they have an eco pass in their pocket. And we have data stretching all the way back to when the programs were founded to show this. A while back, and this was back in 2010, I did a survey of residents in our neighborhood eco pass program. And basically, households created half of the vehicle trips of households without access to the eco pass compared to those with that neighborhood eco pass. And I calculated that on average, a house in our neighborhood eco pass program produces about 55% less mobile emissions, greenhouse gases, than a house without the eco pass. That's why one of our dreams has always been the community eco pass program, where if you live in Boulder, everybody just gets an eco pass, just like all the students do, and I think we see a significant change. We tried to do that with RTD. We're gonna just keep on trying. But you can just see the tremendous difference. We've always said, if you have an eco pass, you're like 5 to 10 times more likely to take transit trips, especially work trips, but this is related to all trips. One of the other kind of new things we started tracking, which is really interesting, is deliveries. So I'm sure all of you on your street, especially those who are teleworking, you're always at home looking out your windows that you're working, you see how many UPS, FedEx, Amazon trucks are coming up and down streets and making deliveries. And so we started tracking, what does this change mean? And so, you know, if you look at the people who are getting deliveries back in 1998, when we first started tracking just the question of did you receive a delivery, 79 or 7.9%, it's about almost tripled or 2.5 times up to 20%. But then we started asking the question is, did this delivery replace a vehicle trip that you would have done to get that object that you had delivered? And so about 38% of residents say, yeah, if I didn't have this delivered to my home, I would have gone driven and gotten it. And so you can imagine that, you know, a truck making multiple deliveries is more efficient vehicle miles travel wise than individuals all going out and getting their goods separately. You can see that, you know, this change in our society, this change in how business has been done, is affecting travel behavior in the city of Boulder. Much like Uber and Lyft did as well, changing travel behavior in the city of Boulder. Uber and Lyft trips are counted as multiple occupant vehicles in our service. So just a summary of our key findings. SOB's travel continues on its downward decline, but not at the pace that we need it to be to meet our transportation master plan goals. Definitely, there's been this continuation of teleworking and this hybrid work environment post-COVID that is continuing, and it appears like it may not be changing. It will be interesting 3 years from now, in 2 years from now, we'll do the Boulder Valley Employee Survey again, and then 3 years from now, we'll do the resident survey again, so we can keep tracking this. VMT is pretty much holding steady, but still has declined over time. What we're seeing is lower transit use, not only for work trips, but also non-work trips by our residents, but I think has something to do with our the service that's being provided. And that, you know, now we're embarking on this new area of tracking e-bike and e-scooter use. And so I think this will be really interesting to see over time. We are also tracking whether or not, if someone says they took an e-bike, we ask whether it's a shared e-bike, the e-cycle system, or it's a private e-bike. So now we're also going to start tracking things like e-bike ownership. And we know we've got a very, very popular e-bike rebate program, and we're continuing that. And, you know, you just see the e-bike adoption rate increasing. And, you know, my guess is that it's going to have a tremendous impact on traffic behavior in the future, because the e-bike eliminate, you know, some of the negative qualities of sometimes biking to work, but where you've got to do it. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the information's valuable. It shows a big increase in e-bike usage in that category. There were 32 crashes between e-bikes and pedestrians on shared path in 2022. You anticipate doing any reporting of crashes and near misses?
Yeah, so we do have our Safe Streets Boulder report. And it comes out, I think that's every 2 years, we report on all the crash statistics. So we would have, you know, car on car, car on bike, bike on people, skateboard. We include everything in that report. So if you look up the Safe Streets Boulder report, you'll find our last one. I think the last one may have been published in 23. Looking at some of my other colleagues. 22. Okay, 22 was the last one. So we probably have another one coming up very soon. I know that Devin Joslin, who is our principal traffic engineer, recently gave an update to our transportation advisory board, kind of on delivering stuff, but all those reported. Then I know we do have a close call form that people can fill out. We can track those as well. But yeah, it's certainly a concern. The speed of the e-bike is the concern. We have a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on our pathways, but at this time it is, you know, we don't have the capability to enforce it.
It's not posted.
Yeah, and it's not posted. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'll go over it.
The rebates for the, you don't have the rights.
The question is, okay, yeah, so the question was, where does the money come from for rebates for Eagle passes and other things. So those come from the transportation budget. So the city of Boulder has a sales tax dedicated to transportation. And so we use that money and we provide subsidies to our neighborhood Eco Pass program. And then for new participants of our business program, we provide subsidies for 2 years to employers for that. So that's all from our email. Yeah.
Well, I've been following the modal trip study since 1990. And one of the peculiarities is that the trip is defined as one block of one. And what that means is that as parking gets further away, everyone who drives also gets carried as a pedestrian. So are you looking for two pedestrian trips sandwiched between two car trips in order to distinguish that from being a real pedestrian?
Yeah. So the question is basically, how do we measure these trips? Because when we give the instruction in our travel diary, we define a trip as anything more than 1 block, which means like if you're going to go visit a friend down the street, that counts as a trip, a walking trip. To my knowledge, I don't think we instruct people to count pedestrian trip from like parking a vehicle. Like if they have to park their vehicle a block away from their house because of parking on their street and they walk to their house, I don't believe that we ask them to count that as the pedestrian trip from their car to their home.
You are,
Well, I would have to look, but
unless you're looking for that pattern of a car trip, a pedestrian trip, another pedestrian trip, and another car trip. You don't know if it's a real pedestrian trip or just getting out of your car and walking over the block. Well,
yeah, I don't think that's how we instruct people to do those trips.
anything over a block.
Yeah, but I think like if someone parks like a block away from their eventual destination of employment, we don't ask them to say, oh, that was a car trip followed by this.
You really think 27% of trips are by walking in the town? Look at, for example, the Broadway bike path, where you see a few people walking and 500 times more driving on Broadway. It doesn't add up.
Okay, well, I will go back and look to see how we define those trips, but. Yes,
So both the single and multi car trips. This is the data set, the hybrid internal combustion data.
yes, we do have in the survey for the vehicle used on trips. So we do, I think we have hybrid, electric, or gasoline powered cars. We also have to make the model, so that we can really dive down into that. So that data exists. We would separate those vehicle trips into whether it's in a hybrid, electric, or gas. And we use that with doing our greenhouse gas emissions survey. Yeah.
But it doesn't, would be fine, and it would be that my less trip.
Yeah, no, it still counts as a trip, but when we do our greenhouse gas inventory, that's where it would be taken into account. It's still a trip. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. So if you look at the trends that you're most interested in, you imagine 10 years forward, something like that, and you imagine incredible, transformative progress.
Yeah.
What are the things we did that enabled that?
Well, I would think, if we really want to change travel behavior in the city of Boulder, I think one is we've got to look at increasing our transit service levels, whether that is with RTD or beyond RTD. I think we have to look at parking and the management of parking. You put the two, as I mentioned, the two most powerful tools in changing travel behavior are paying to park, but also providing tools like the Eco Pass. So we have to look at parking and parking management. It's the carrot and the stick approach to me. And then I really think that the evolution of e-bikes and e-scooters are also going to have a significant impact on people's travel behavior. And as we continue to make those investments, make those safer modes. So
So that'll do it. That's what.
I think that would, and, well, land use changes. But that's a much bigger issue. The foundation of a transportation system is land use. And if we don't start really evaluating our land use and how it impacts transportation, we're never gonna get to where we are.
Let's take two more questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to where I was going. Just wanted to call attention to the fact that the modal shift study is city residents only. And from what I've read, we have like 65,000 people driving into work every day. And so many of them probably would like to live here close to where they work, as you said, CU students too. So land use is something we have to align with.
Yeah. And we do, in our Boulder Valley employee survey, we look at both resident and non-resident employees. So you'll be able to look at, a non-resident employee, how do they travel into work, and then during the day, how do they travel? So we keep a record of trips made during the day by those non-resident employees as well. And I think you bring up a good point, because what we've seen is a flip-flop in the residents who live and work in Boulder and those that do not live in Boulder but come to Boulder. And we've seen it now over 60% of Boulder employees are non-residents. What we've also seen, because we collect the geographic data, is that they're moving further and further away to the Boulder house and outside the RTD service district. So it's a huge challenge. So to me, like a mode like van pooling, like here's another thing to add to your list, Brian. Van pooling, I think, is one of the underutilized modes that we have access to as we are seeing this demographic and geographic change in where employees are living. Of how do we get them into the cities and their job, not in a single occupant vehicle? Van pooling, I think, is we have a number of vans, but I think that we could have a significant more number of vans to be able to see. So, yes.
My question is, the weather here changes a lot. So do we track the usage of the nodes and integration across students? And then how do we think about what that looks like in terms of a sustainable solution? Like, I would never be able to give up a car.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to need it in winter. And I think about, like, if I intend I want to ride my bike, but if I get stuck in weather and I try to get Uber to get home, I don't even know if the Uber can accommodate my bike to get me in my bike.
Yeah.
So how do we solve for the seasons?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly tough, and we know that it's changing. The only thing I know that we really actively track in terms of weather and mode use is on our bicycle paths. So we have counters throughout our multi-use pass system, counting the number of trips that are taken on those systems, and we can plot them on a graph and then plot them against precipitation is the biggest reason why things or why people change their travel behavior. So we can look, nice sunny day, at an intersection on a multi-use pass system, we have 2,000 bikes pass, rainy day, 100. So we do track it in that regard, but we haven't tracked it, I think, beyond the bicycle mode, we haven't really tracked the interaction. But certainly get back. I think, John, you're going to take it away from me, right?
For now, round of applause. Thank you so much. We genuinely appreciate the data and feedback. This is good. We're going to move. We heard a question about the weather. We're going to move from weather to climate. But I want to thank EJ and Britt for being here from RMI to talk about vehicle electrification and modal shift. Why we're doing this, as a reminder, is not just for our economy, but for the environment and for our community. So thank you for providing hard numbers to be behind the hard questions.
Well, thanks so much.
All right. Great. Thank you.
So my name is EJ Cook. This is Bryn Grimwald. We're both from RMI. Chris, that was a great overview of the progress on mode shift, and Bryn's going to talk about some of the tools that can also help make that happen going into the future.
I'm gonna actually start though with the other part that we have to do, which is electrify everything that's left behind in terms of travel that's going on. So I'll start off with just a brief overview of our organization and then share some details of a big project that we're part of called Charging Smart, which is designed to help communities like Boulder get ready for the rapid transition to EVs. And then Bryn's going to talk about some tools to support mode shift and e-bike use. So RMI is a mission-driven nonprofit headquartered here in Colorado, but now with offices in the Bay Area, New York, Washington, Beijing, Delhi, and Nigeria. And our mission is to transform the global economy away from fossil fuels in order to secure a clean, prosperous, and secure future for everyone. And so to do that, we work in a variety of spaces that touch all aspects of the energy system, from power generation to buildings, heavy industry. We work on policy, finance, data science. We work in a variety of places around the world. The team that Bryn and I are part of is focused on decarbonizing on-road ground transport. So that's everything from e-bikes and scooters all the way up to Class 8 long-haul trucks and everything in between that. And in order to decarbonize transport, we have to electrify all the miles that are traveled. And that implies a huge increase in electricity demand from transportation between now and 2040, and we want to be on a pathway to net zero by 2050. Of course, in conjunction with that, we also have to clean up the grid, which means a ton more renewables to supply all of that energy. But at the community level, cities and towns and their utilities are now starting to ask the very important question: how do we actually prepare for this rapid transition over the next 10 to 20 years? And in order to prepare, what we really need to do is shift the mindset from being reactive to being proactive. What do we mean by that? Well, to start, that means anticipating where, when, and how much EV charging load is going to come into our communities so that we can start investing in the infrastructure needed to support that. We also need to very smartly prioritize where we make those investments. Yes, we definitely need to double down on where we know there's going to be EV demand in the near future. But at the same time, we can't make the mistake of simply extrapolating the path into the future, because that runs the risk of perpetuating the inequalities that are already in the system today. We need to take a hard look and understand how we can ensure that everyone has equitable access to clean transportation in the future. And lastly, we need to change the planning paradigm. In particular, it relates to the regulators and how they approve utility investments. And this comes down a lot to helping them gain confidence that this load will actually show up on the grid in the way that we say it will, where we say it will, so that they can be confident that those investments from the utility companies are used useful improvement. Okay, so one of the many projects that we're working on to help advance towards these goals, and in particular at the community level, is the Charging Smart program. This is a multi-million-dollar, multi-year DOE-funded program. It's led by IREC, the International Renewable Energy Council, and we're one of the key partners on the team. This project is intended to help communities like Boulder and many others across the entire country prepare for the coming wave of electric vehicles in their communities. It is a designation style system. So as communities choose to participate and take specific actions towards specific outcomes, communities can earn points towards designation like bronze, silver, etc., that indicate places readiness for electric vehicles. And how we support that is through creating a variety of tools, templates, resources, and even technical support to help communities make these decisions and move the ball forward. And so there's a lot of components of this. I'll just highlight a couple. Starting at the top, and Boulder probably is a good ways along this path, but not everyone here, just in terms of what is the vision and the goal for the future, so that everybody is swimming in the same direction, moving towards the same goal, right? But then also, where does that charging need to go? How much? What kind? How can it be designed in a way that brings the most benefits to the community? we have tools, and I'll show those in a second, that help develop maps across a whole area in order to be able to better visualize what's going on, how it relates to political boundaries, et cetera. And critically working with the local utility to get ready. So if this is something that Boulder might be interested in, Colorado actually is one of the states in the first group of pilot areas that's being rolled out now. And I'd be happy to facilitate a conversation with the folks who could talk more about how Boulder might be able to plug into this. But in terms of Harmonize work specifically, we're building some tools to help understand how much charging you need, where and when. One of those key questions I outlined earlier. To do that, we built a tool that uses real world cell phone data and fleet telematics data, hundreds of millions of data points, in order to be able to understand real travel patterns and what that implies for charging needs. So we start by aggregating up all that trip data to understand where the vehicles are going, how far they're driving. That implies energy needs, right? Then, where are they stopping? How long are they stopping? That tells you how long they might be able to charge if there were a charger in that location. Those two things together, how much energy they need and how long they have to charge, tells you how many chargers you need there and what time. If somebody's driven short distance, maybe from Louisville and here to Boulder to go to work, and you're here all day, you only need a basic level 2 charger. If on the other hand, you're talking about maybe a utility contractor who's driving all around the area, hundreds of miles in a day, and only stopping 15 minutes for lunch, that might be high power level 3 charger. But the point is that by using real world data, we're able to assess that at large scale, but down to the census tract level, and then go from there, be able to understand how many chargers you actually need, what kind, and when. And so I'll finish this part just by showing some outputs from this tool. So this map on the left is showing Seattle, Washington State is the first state that we rolled this tool out to. It will be national by the end of the summer. And what you're looking at on the left there at the census tract level is the peak power demand at any given hour of the day that vehicles would need were they EVs in that area. And then right here, this little guy, which I know is hard to see probably at the back of the room, that's the load curve throughout the entire day. That's a key piece of data for utilities to be able to understand, when combining that with building loads, industry, et cetera, what are the implications for the grid? But then if I was a city planner, I'd want to be looking over here. This translates the power and energy demand to the charger demand. How many chargers do you need to put in a given area? What kind are they? Single family, multi-family, work, public DCFC. Begin to give a view of what those targets should be so that when we're making investment decisions in that infrastructure, it's based on what that. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to Brittany.
Thank you, Ian. So obviously we have to electrify everything. Transportation emissions are a significant part of the US's total emissions overall at roughly 28%, with a large number of that coming from heavy vehicles. And RMI performed in 2021 a gap analysis that found that to stay aligned with the 1.5 degree C scenario outlined by the Paris Climate Agreement, we not only need to electrify everything, but we also need to reduce driving by roughly 20% by 2030. So electrification and supporting EVs are going to be important, but we also need to consider how we're going to reduce driving overall. So one of the tools that we have produced in order to help cities with this goal is our e-bike calculator. So this calculator allows for cities to see what percentage of trips are, all of these are in vehicle trips, what percentage of trips are happening by what mile breakdown. So here I have Boulder's trips. So roughly 50%, over 50% of Boulder's trips on a daily basis or on a weekly basis are under 5 miles. And a significant number further are over that, but this represents a huge amount of opportunity to potentially switch people to a less energy intensive mode. Our calculator looks at general adoption as well as specific e-bike programs. I just left it on the general adoption use. You can experiment with an e-bike incentive program that with all outputs based off with all inputs defaulted to Denver's e-bike-based program. But outputs include emissions, economic impact, air quality, avoided fuel and energy use, as well as your VMT reduction. So if we could cut these short trips, so under 5 miles, by 25% over 10 years, this would save Boulder over 6 million gallons of gasoline, reduce emissions by over 550,000 metric tons, as well as help reduce transportation costs. So here you can see the emissions reductions. So the green lines are if we just continue to drive those miles. These are all just short trips, these are under 5 miles. Versus the teal is what would happen if we replace a significant portion of these with e-bikes. And this calculator does account for EV adoption as well. So we are making an assumption around that EVs will continue to grow, but this will help alleviate demand for electricity, as well as helping reduce emissions along the way. We also created a tool to address the need to cut VMT at the state level, which is called the Smarter Modes Calculator. So it has all 50 states, and it shows the benefits of reducing VMT on emissions, economics, health metrics. So what would be the impacts on air quality, vehicle crash, death, and injury, and more. So even with 100% EV adoption by 2050, a 20% of VMT reduction in Colorado would reduce emissions quite a lot, 3 megatons, compared to just EV adoption alone, lower energy demand by quite a lot, as well as reducing gasoline use by over 257 million gallons, as well as avoiding a number of deaths per year. So this is a graph that we had to show. This is if we continue to go along with the business as usual EV adoption and don't do any cuts. This is with a mid-range EV adoption scenario where we assume that roughly 50% of cars are EVs by 2050. And then this is that same adoption scenario, but you also drive a lot less. So you would basically be seeing the same emissions drop as if every American stopped using electricity in their house for 5 years. So reducing VMT is quite a significant potential to help meet our climate goals along the way. Thank you.
Questions?
Investment that you made to improve the efficiency of the actual charger, so reduce the charging time. The public level is that part.
The question was, is there work being done to improve the performance of charging? So yeah, I mean, so many things are going on there. If we're talking about the vehicles that are on the market today, we're going to be on the market in, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years, which means we're being designed right now. That really is mainly going to be driven around moving from 400 volt architecture to an 800 and 900 volt architecture. That means if you think of vehicles like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 as an example of one right now that is running at a higher voltage, that enables them to take on board much higher rates of power. However, there are still going to be issues with thermal management there, which is a big constraining factor, and frankly, the reliability of the hardware, the charging hardware at those power levels. Looking further over the horizon, when we start to talk about solid-state batteries, this is where I think you're going to see much more of a step change in performance when it comes to charging. Solid-state batteries are presumably able to both accept higher rates of charge with less degradation, also do so across a much broader temperature range. I'm sure everyone knows about how we have some struggles in the really cold weather with charging. But solid-state batteries is kind of still a big question mark. You have some big players like CATL in China saying that they are going to have a commercial product in the next couple of years. I'm a little skeptical about that. I do know there are some military grade batteries in that space already reaching the market, but in terms of like widespread availability to you and me, I think that's more of like a 7 to 10 year kind of horizon.
Given the state of current charging, it seems like plug-in hybrids are a really good solution for avoiding gas usage for most travel that people have local, and then still enabling not having range anxiety, being able to use gas for longer trips. Have you looked at effects of plug-in hybrids, percentage of EVs, impact anywhere?
Yeah, so, depends on, well, the question was, plug-in hybrids and how they fit in, given their ability to mitigate range anxiety while at the same time electrifying, most of the miles we travel. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. If you look at the, distribution of trip length across the whole country, it's something like 22 miles a day, which means that every plug-in hybrid could easily do that. You charge on an ordinary plug, like on the wall there in a couple hours, and you're ready to go again for your 22 miles the next day. And they are certain brands, in particular like Toyota, Honda, the Japanese brands there, and some of the US manufacturers really leaning into them. There's a lot more models are coming in available. Interestingly, though, these EVs already dwarf the sales of plug-in hybrids by multiples, and both are growing though at a very rapid rate. I think it absolutely is a good transition technology, especially for more difficult use cases like one-car households, certain commercial uses where you really are driving a ton of miles and you might not always have that ability to charge. But over the long run, we do have, if we want to achieve our climate goals, we have to go fully EV and get rid of the internal combustion engine vehicle completely.
You mentioned that several times, communities like Boulder. Well, so many communities are not. So how does that play in?
Yeah, I was speaking in very general ways.
It's like any community.
Any community. In fact, I would say that Boulder, like the Charging Smart program that I was outlining, is while a number of the things in there that are on the more advanced end I do think would benefit Boulder a lot, to be honest, our core target audience are all the communities that don't have, like a multi-person transportation department that actually have resources to work on this. Most places are not like that. In fact, you know that in Atlanta, the whole city of Atlanta, is one person focused on EVs. So that's kind of the point, is that for most of the country, we need to make things easier, more streamlined, simpler to get these projects over the line. But also, they can learn a lot from places like Boulder that have been breaking trip and can help show those lessons learned. And that's also part of what we're trying to bring in terms of best practice and real world case studies from leading places. Boulders.
One more question. Thank you, Jim Brand. So you're really more futurists, and as you're thinking about the future, imagine these much higher levels of e-bikes running around the town. And have your teams given thought to what we need to do to plan for transportation systems to accommodate that now that we're building out, will be with us as this transition happens. I'm kind of thinking about the multi-use paths, but I don't know, anything in that place?
Yeah, so the e-bike calculator currently exists is kind of simple because it's an Excel spreadsheet that two people put together. So we do have hopes to eventually make it a bit more of a complicated system that would account for potentially estimating the amount of infrastructure you would need to support it, as well as potentially looking at what would the impact be of reducing car mileage on roads, right? So as we all know, everybody here loves potholes, but if you have fewer cars on the road, would that potentially do anything to alleviate the potholes? We also want to combine that potentially with the smarter modes calculator, so the BMT reduction calculator down the line, to say we need to have this 20% cut in overall single occupancy vehicle driving. But then what is that made up with, right? There are some of these trips that need to be done. So what percentage of those trips could realistically go to walking, biking, transit, other modes entirely? So we're starting to look at this and figure out how do we take the things that we currently have and expand them to be a little bit more helpful. At the time we were devising these, it was to bring some data into the conversation to say we need to also consider these other things as well. When the e-bike calculator was started, Denver had just started their e-bike incentive program, and there was a lot of qualitative data. And the goal of the e-bike calculator was to really provide a firm quantitative data to say, over time and with focus on this, this can be a really beneficial thing for not only the residents using it, but for cities overall in order to meet goals that they have.
Hey, wow, you listened when I said one more question. Well done. All right, round of applause. All right, as before we wrap up, I was going to say, before we wrap up, I wanted to bring Will Shepherd up here, just briefly for a couple of brief remarks.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you both, EJ. Really appreciate it. Wanted to point out that Chris Hagman had mentioned this notion of a community eco-pass. That's actually happening in the Boulder Junction district for both staff members who work there, like getting in the RMI office, as well as anyone who lives there. A big part of my role at the Transportation Connections team is managing and supporting that eco-pass program through the new MyRide app or the new MyRide card. If any of you, your businesses, your colleagues need support on that, talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to discuss it. It's a great neighborhood, and this next week is a great time to go over and do it. Diana's got this fun new cafe, so we will have our superstation here at the chamber, as well as a co-hosted presence there on Junction Place, right next to RMI. So if you want to come see this notion of community transportation oriented places in action, please come join us there next Wednesday, and feel free to reach out if you need help with mine.
All right. So just as a couple quick reminders as we wrap up here today. If you have not yet signed up for our newsletter, please hop in the back. We have business cards with QR codes there. Lane is definitely manning the station there. So talk to her, but more importantly, or equally importantly, please hit that QR code so you can keep up to date on our goings on. And just as another brief reminder, what percent tax credit do you get? 50% tax credit. If you have questions that go beyond that easy number, because taxes are always simple until they're not, we have flyers in the back. We are more than willing to talk to you to make sure that you take advantage of this. This tax credit almost went away last year, or this year. Literally. It was by grace of God and a lot of work from our Boulder Chamber Transportation Connections team and a lot of people in the legislature at the last minute to actually fit this into another bill on the second to last day of the legislative session. It was set to die. We brought it back. Now let's prove its worth. And then last but not least, thank you all for your participation here. Please enjoy the rest of your time and take a commemorative sandwich with you.